Okay, we are live. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. It has been a very long time. Haven't seen you in a while, since before Pesach, like a few weeks before Pesach even. So it's so nice to be here. So nice to be back in Tanya, to feel like we're dipping back into what we're supposed to be doing here in this world. So I just want to do a brief review of what we had done last time, because we're already up to Perek chapter 37. And last time we spoke about chapter 35 and 36. And it's kind of a build-up. So I wanted to just kind of like a little bit review what we're up to, where we're at. I see some new faces. And then we will, God willing, go into what we are speaking about today. As usual, this is sponsored by Roth. And thank you so much for making lunch, covering for Mrs. Wolf. Um, and last thing I wanted to say, yeah, it's the class was started in honor of Leah Zuri, and it's in her honor that we learn every day. And usually we have a lot of kids running around because she would bring her kids here to Chassidus, so one to keep that in mind. And the last bit of credit I want to give to is Rebbe Baltiel, who I base my shiurim on. I really enjoy shiurim, and anything that you hear from me is not coming from me. It's just me repeating what I've heard from him. So I think it's important to give credit where it's due. So if you want to go to the source, I mean, the ultimate source is the Alter Rebbe, but if you want to listen to a good teacher, there's lots of good teachers out there. So what did we learn in Perek Lamed Hey? So we actually started off with almost the question of why do we have Judaism? Like, what is the whole point of Judaism? What are we doing here? And the Alter Rebbe started discussing, like, why do we do Torah mitzvahs again? Like, what's the significance of this? And what's actually happening when we're performing a mitzvah? And what happens when we learn Torah? And why is it so ritualistic? I'm just like jogging your memories. Do you remember, like, we were talking about all these different details? Like, if Torah and mitzvahs is supposed to be this connection between us and the Abishter, if it's supposed to be about us really feeling like we're one with God, then why does it have to do with, like, a lulav, like take the palm branch and shake it around? Why does it have to do with, like, we have to bring in the Shabbat with 2 candles plus and like make this blessing on it? What is all of that? And so we were discussing 2 concepts in those 2 prakim, which were the concepts of Hashem wants us to give ourselves, right? It's not just supposed to be, Torah mitzvahs are not just supposed to be us refining ourselves. It's not just supposed to help us become better people and for us ultimately to reach Olam Haba and for us to be elevated as human beings and to be refined as human beings. It's because Hashem also had purpose, right? Hashem wants to be brought down into this world, not just from our perspective. We want to rise up and go closer to God. Hashem wants himself to be brought into this world. And the way that happens is through physical objects. So that was the first piece. And the other piece was what Hashem really wants is for us to make space for him. And we were talking about how we can become a host for Hashem, for his will. Instead of us following through and doing what we want, we make space for Hashem's will. So instead of taking this tea and just drinking it straight, I pause for a moment and make a bracha and acknowledge God's presence in my life and that he gave me this food, and I make that bracha, and that's me bringing his will into my world. And that concept is a concept of almost like Kabala soul, where we don't necessarily understand why we need to make a bracha. And even if we did, even if we thought that a bracha is going to refine us, which it does, we're not necessarily doing it only for that. We want to do it because Hashem wants us to do it, and because we want to make space for him in this world. So there's a little bit of this like selfless piece that Hashem is also bringing to the picture, and we discussed that in those 2 prakim, where there's a little bit of a surrendering, and that's what Hashem wants from us. He wants us to surrender ourselves, for us to let go of our own will and for us to make space for his. And by so doing, we become a host for him. So some of the mitzvahs the Alter Rebbe lists there are, let's say, tefillin. How does a man make himself a host for God, or make his arm a host for God? What he's doing is he's taking his physical arm and he's saying, my arm could be doing lots of things right now, but I want to make my arm a host for God, so therefore I'm going to put on these tefillin. How can a man take his livelihood and make it a host for God, he literally gives from his purse, he gives from his wallet, and he gives tzedakah. He gives, tithes. He gives from his own for God to perform a mitzvah. So we spoke about that. We spoke about Yitzchak versus Yishmael. Yitzchak had a bris just like Yishmael had a bris. And the famous argument between the two of them was Yishmael said, I did something so much greater. I was 13 years old when I had my bris, and you were 8 days old. What's so great about you having a bris? Right? And I could hear the question, right? He made a huge sacrifice there. And the Alter Rebbe brings this as an example to say that, yes, he made this huge sacrifice, but what's really precious to Hashem is not us making a sacrifice, because there's a little bit of us involved in that. There's a little bit of what the Alter Rebbe calls yesh, our own experience, our ego, basically, involved in making such a sacrifice, as opposed to just doing it because Hashem said. And that is what Hashem ultimately wants. He doesn't want us to say, I'm going to go back and forth. Do I want to do Hashem's will? Do I want to do my will? I'm going to choose to make this great sacrifice and do Hashem's will, right? I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I have definitely had this experience where someone does a favor for me and they're like, I was thinking about it, and like, it was really hard for me, but then I just decided I'm going to give this to you. And it's almost like, I'd rather not take it. I don't want you to make such a great sacrifice for me. It doesn't, right? There's so much of that person involved in the gift to me. It doesn't any longer feel like a gift to me. It feels like it's all about them. And it almost feels like an act of selfishness. And so here the Alter Rebbe is bringing this concept of Kabbalah soul. Kabbalah soul is supposed to be not me, less of me, and me just hearing God's voice, hearing what he wants, and choosing to do that. Not making a great sacrifice, but just submitting, which is what Yishmael did at 8 days old. Okay, fine. So that brings us to this Perek. And again, the Alter Rebbe is still talking about bridging heaven and earth. How do we bridge this huge gap that we feel, right, from our perspective, is between heaven and earth, between God and this physical, mundane world that we see, that we perceive? And again, remember, from Hashem's perspective, the entire world is nothing. It is all subsumed within him. It's not like there's any sort of separateness, and we spoke about that in previous Prekim. But Hashem makes it that from our perspective, there is separateness. Why? Right? Why? What is it that we have to do here? So like we said before, there's a few different things, right? There's the Torah and mitzvahs. There's the whole purpose of creation in order to refine us, right? The spirituality of Torah and mitzvahs, to take us, these physical beings who are like very human physical bodies that have an neshama inside of us, and for us to like bring out the neshama, bring out that God consciousness, and experience the spirituality of Hashem. Right? So there's that piece, which is really important. And that's why there's Torah and mitzvahs, and that's part of the purpose of the world, for us to become more spiritually refined people. Beautiful. The next thing that we were speaking about was these mitzvahs, these acts. Every single act that I do refines this little part of the world. And that's a very important piece, right? That I take this lulav and I refine this lulav, because that lulav was created for me to expose its inner spark, expose its inner purpose. It was literally made so that I could allow the godliness to shine out of it. And I do that by performing a mitzvah with it, by making a bracha, by shaking it and performing that mitzvah. Here the Alter Rebbe talks about something that's really, really powerful, a little esoteric, but we're gonna try to make it practical like we usually do. So the Alter Rebbe brings here a medrash about Hashem creating Am Yisrael as a nation. And what he did was he created a community. He created a nation. What happened at Matan Torah, we became one. Ki ish echad b'lev echad. We were now one entity. And what happened there, the Hebrew word of tzibor, which is just a cool acronym, tzibor is tzaddik, beis, then a vav and a resh. Tzaddik stands for tzaddik, beis stands for beinani, and the vav and the resh is virasha. Which means that Hashem created one community, one nation, made out of many different types of people, many different levels, many varying levels of people. And Hashem wanted it that way. Hashem wants there to be variation, and Hashem wants all of them to equally have Kabbalah soul and to equally perform the same exact mitzvah. Which means that there's something about us collectively that Hashem also wants from the purpose of the world. Hashem wants all of us to do this mission as a whole, together, as a nation. And that means that there's a piece, welcome, there's a piece that you're bringing to my collective mission that I cannot bring. And there's a piece that you're bringing to our collective mission that I cannot bring. Which means that collectively, we're all supporting each other and depending on one another to bring about this ultimate refinement of this world. And so the Alter Rebbe wants to kind of like go into this concept and help us understand and recognize what's happening here. Before this, let's just repeat, before this, we were talking about how every time we do a mitzvah, every time we engage, we're bridging heaven and earth by becoming more spiritual people. We're refining ourselves, which is what Hashem wants us to do. It's part of our Avodas Birurim, this purpose that we have of elevating the sparks. Beautiful. The second piece was doing mitzvahs. Now we have to actually elevate physical objects. We have to get involved with, this phone has to be elevated, this cup has to be elevated, this mic has to be elevated, and that's something that I have to engage with. Here the Alter Rebbe is bringing something else. We don't have to just do our own personal missions. There's also a collective mission that we all are depending on one another on in order to complete this whole task of bringing heaven down to earth and bringing earth up to heaven. And this is why the world was created, and this is why we have Torah and mitzvahs, and this is the purpose of it all. And so the Alter Rebbe is saying that if you look at a physical mitzvah, right, the reason why we're going into this physical mitzvah is in order to elevate it. And the Alter Rebbe says not only what happens when you elevate that mitzvah, but everything involved in elevating that mitzvah becomes elevated too, right? So for example, a person is inspiring a crowd, right? Like Rabbi Wolf was just telling me, he was speaking to 1,000 women in Crown Heights. What happens when he's doing that? He's inspiring women, he's teaching Torah, he was teaching Tanya to them. So what happened was the mic that he was speaking into by performing this mitzvah of creating more bitachon and emunah and teaching women about Torah and mitzvahs, that mic was now elevated. Incredible. The stage he's standing on is now elevated. The clothes he's wearing is now elevated. Everything involved becomes a part of that mitzvah, which is absolutely incredible if you start thinking about all the details of the things that you're involved with when we're talking about good things, right? So imagine a person's livelihood. So you think a person goes to work and this is his work day and this is what he's involved with. I don't know, let's say a man is a lawyer. So he's a lawyer and this is what he does. And then he goes home and he has like an hour to himself and he's able to learn, if at all, right? Or in the morning he's having shachris and like that's a spiritual part of the day. And that's when he is elevating himself and he's refining himself. And that's how he does his little part in refining the world. The Alter Rebbe says, not so. When a man involves himself with money matters, right? Very mundane. We're talking about very physical, real part of his world. And he does so in a way that is honest, where he has integrity, where he makes sure to treat people fairly with Avos Yisrael. What happens is all of his dealings, all of his business deals, everything that when he stood up in court, all the people that he spoke to when he stood up in court, all of that is impacted. All of that is brought up with him in his mitzvah, in his good deed, in his refinement of his world. Okay? The Rebbe says an incredible story. In the middle of a sicha, the Rebbe shares the story. I don't know more of the story. Like, I don't know exactly who he was talking about, but the Rebbe said there was a wealthy man and he was becoming from, he was learning more about Torah and mitzvahs, and he was super wealthy. He had a yacht. And so one time he was on vacation and he's on his yacht and he didn't know which direction east was. So he happened to be standing near the captain. He says, "Captain, which direction is east?" And the captain looks at him and he thinks, that is the direction, that's east, but why do you need to know? And the man says, because I'm actually Jewish and I'm starting to learn more about Torah. And one of the things I'm supposed to do is pray to God. So when I pray to God, I'm supposed to be facing east. So I was just wondering where east is. And the captain thought to himself, if this man who has everything in the world and is on vacation and doesn't need to perform or do anything is stopping in his day to pray, I think me, I'm just the captain. I could also maybe pray to God a little bit too. It was like a humbling lesson for this captain to hear. And the Rebbe says this story and says, and what happened in that moment when the captain heard the message, heard that spiritual refinement, heard what this wealthy man was doing, which was taking part of his day and devoting it to God and focusing himself on God. What happened then was the boat was elevated, right? So the yacht was elevated, the vacation was elevated. Every aspect of this person's experience, this whole vacation was now elevated. And now the purpose of this vacation, the purpose of the yacht, the purpose of all this man's money is now revealed. Because what he did was he inspired someone else. And the Rebbe says this story. What's amazing is that if we could start thinking about our impact and how generous Hashem is with our impact, right? How much Hashem gives to us so that we can give back to him. You start thinking about everything that you do and how when you do it, even with just intention, what the ripple effect of that is on your family, on your entire home. It's incredible. If you just made your husband a coffee in the morning, or you decided to call up a friend at night because you remembered that she had gone through something that day and you just hadn't been able to catch up with her then, but you have that extension of Avos Yisrael towards her in the evening. What happens then? Your phone, your day, everything becomes elevated. And again, like the generosity that Hashem makes it, that everything is brought up with you with that one act is so incredible. So before now, we thought, okay, I have my piece in the world that I have to elevate, right? I have to do this one thing. I have this mission, and I just have to stay focused on it. And we have been doing that, and that's beautiful. Everyone has their own individual mitzvahs. Everyone has their own individual mission, and it's true. We do have our own unique mission. But here, when the Alter Rebbe is starting to bring in this idea of we have a collective purpose together, now something has changed a little bit. And the Frierdiker Rebbe actually spoke about Avodas Birurim, and he said, now we no longer understand or know clearly what our unique purpose is. It used to be, right, let's go way back in time. There were these incredible neshamas. There was Adam and Chava, and they had their avodah, they had their purpose. What was their purpose? Hold it together for 3 hours and don't eat from the fruits. Okay? And unfortunately or fortunately, they were not able to fulfill that mission, ate from the fruits, and then there was a shattering, right? And what happened from there was the 600,000 souls were basically brought into this world slowly through history, and those 600,000 souls now had their purpose. What was their purpose? This, what we're talking about here. To perform all the Torah, to learn all the Torah, to perform all the mitzvahs, and every single one of those 600,000 souls has to do it. Learn every part of Torah and perform every single mitzvah. So those souls had to kind of come through the process a few times, right? So those 600,000 souls went through it and then went through it again, and still the world is not getting refined. So those 600,000 souls, which is not all that much, had to splinter off into sub-neshamais and smaller neshamais and littler missions and more refined missions until here we are today, still needing to refine the world, which in a way I'm grateful for because I'm happy to be in existence. But in general, we still haven't done what we've had to do for the last 5,000 years. So what does that actually mean? So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, we now no longer know exactly what it is. We don't have, it's too subtle. It's too exacting for us to know exactly what our mission is. So what do we have to do? Anything that comes your way, we have to do. It's kind of like a grab and go purpose right now. Any mitzvah that comes your way, whatever you're involved with, is the refinement that is supposed to be happening. And that's where the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here. He's saying, you go to work, you get into your car, you give your kids breakfast, you're involved with making sure that, I don't know, your job is successful. Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever is coming your way, it's supposed to be coming your way. And this obviously is a deepening of the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, where Hashem is sending you to the space where you're supposed to be because there's something there for you to refine. I was actually, a few weeks ago, I drove to Colorado for Pesach, and Hashem put it in my head to bring along matzah, just in case we met someone in the middle of nowhere, to give them a matzah. So we were basically traveling from LA to Vail, Colorado. And on that direct line, there's lots of different national parks, which was the reason why I went. So I took my kids to Zion, Bryce, Capitol Reef, and Arches National Park. And in every national park, we were just looking for Jews, asking everybody, are you Jewish? Passover's coming up. And it was like a little bit uncomfortable for some of my kids because they're shy, or they just want to mind their own business. And it was very hard for us to find someone. We literally couldn't find anybody. There was no one. It was funny because the only people we saw were frum Jews. We saw a whole camp of frum boys. We saw tons of couples, frum women, frum women and children. And we couldn't find anyone until we went on this hike. We weren't supposed to go on this hike. We happened to just go. And as we're going up, I said, you know what? It's a big hike, but let's just take it with us just in case. And I took this box of matzah, and my kids are asking everybody. And then they finally got discouraged and they couldn't ask anybody anymore. And I thought, you know what? I'll just hold it and I'll ask. And I finally found this woman. And I said, are you Jewish? And she said, sheepishly, like, yeah. And I said, amazing. We've been looking for you, right? We're looking for you. I think that really took her aback because what does that even mean? I said, it's, Passover is coming up, and these matzahs, we brought them for you to eat on Passover because it's a big mitzvah to do that on Passover. And I don't think her boyfriend was Jewish, but she was. And she took it, which I thought was astounding because she's on a hike. It's a little schleppy to take something else with you on a hike, and she was heading up and we were heading down, but she took it. What's so incredible to me about that story, what's so beautiful is that there's a deep understanding that because we collectively need each other to fulfill the purpose of creation, it means that I can't just worry about my own mission, what I need to do to refine my Dalet Amos, my four corners, my home, or my workspace. I also need to be worrying about whatever's coming my way. And lots of things are coming my way. This woman was in my way, which meant that I was supposed to, that was the mitzvah that was coming my way, to help her to figure out what her purpose is so that we could all get to where we're supposed to be getting to. And that's why the Rebbe made such a huge campaign to reach out. Before the Frierdiker Rebbe, there was no shluchus, and there was definitely not an emphasis on from people trying to bring back our own. There really wasn't a concept of bringing people back. There was very much like live and let live. They want to do that. They left the fold, and we forget about them. And Chassidus changed that concept because Chassidus brought this idea of we need one another collectively. We're not fully experiencing Avos Yisrael and seeing the other person and their worth if we're not showing ourselves that this woman eating matzah on Pesach, even if she's not in any way Jewish, from or actively pursuing Yiddishkeit, that mitzvah could be the tipping point for the entire purpose of creation. Because we all collectively, all of our neshamas are here with one specific mission, something to contribute, and all of us have to be involved. So how to take this and make it very practical? When we're talking about looking for those last sparks that we need to refine, we're obviously talking about within the realm of permissible things, right? The reason why we're able to elevate a lulav is because a lulav is permissible to us. The reason why I'm able to elevate this tea is because it's kosher, right? This is something that I can elevate because it is within the realm of mutar, right? If something is not able to be elevated, that's because it's not something that is kosher, that's permissible for me to engage with. So the way to elevate that is to actually non-engage with it. Okay? The Alter Rebbe here says a very important piece that I think we don't like to emphasize because it could be a little bit heavy. But the idea is that as much as we're trying so hard to do good things, there's also parts of our world perhaps that is still not refined because we're still allowing negativity, or we're still allowing things that should not be refined, we're still giving them attention, right? So if the way to, let's say, destroy things that are not mutter is by resisting them, right? So for example, if I'm not going to eat bacon for breakfast, right? It's not such a hard thing for me, but either way, right, whether it's hard for me or not, I'm still fulfilling the obligation. So if I say I'm not eating that bacon for breakfast, then what I'm doing is I'm elevating it. How? By not allowing it to exist. I'm doing the right thing. I'm elevating this world by not feeding it energy. When I say a juicy piece of Lashon Hara gossip, what I'm doing is I am elevating something bad, but in a way of giving it energy. And the way to remove the negativity from this world and do that avodas of birurim, removing the things, removing the chaff, removing the lack of God consciousness to reveal God consciousness, would be to starve the negativity, to starve the non-permissible. So something here the Alter Rebbe is saying is, yes, we're doing great things and we keep trying to elevate and to see where we could perform more and have more Kabbalas all, and look out for other people and see where they could be fulfilling their mission. And we have a lot of officers. So, and there's also a part of our lives where we're still feeding the non-permissible. And that's something that's supposed to be starved off. It would not exist if we weren't giving it energy, because that's the difference between emes and sheker. Something that is emes, something that is true, like God consciousness, like God, is sustained throughout. It's always. It's not something that could be snuffed out. But something that's not true doesn't stand. Like sheker doesn't stand. Even the words of sheker, the letters of sheker, all of them, a shin is on one little point, a kuf is crooked, a resh will fall over. It's supposed to signify, it's supposed to be symbolic for the fact that sheker does not have the ability to be sustainable. The way it's sustained is if you keep it alive. And so the sheker that is, let's say, our world where we don't see God consciousness, we don't reveal him, there's two missions here where we have to reveal him. We have to bring the God consciousness out by doing those active mitzvahs with things that are permissible to us. And there's this other avodah that we don't talk enough about, which is, where are we not starving off the non-permissible? Where are we looking at the non-permissible or engaging with the non-permissible and feeding it energy and giving it more and allowing it to stay alive? I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I've definitely had this experience where there's something, like, let's say with my kids, someone who's bothering them, right? Like, example of a kid who's just like being annoying to them. So the number one way of giving that child something to do is either you walk away from the kid, right? So you just leave him alone, go away. Don't give it attention, right? A brother and sister are fighting and the brother's like niggling at the little sister. If you make it a big deal, then he'll just keep continuing to do it because you're just feeding him with all this attention, and that's kind of just what he wanted. As opposed to just like it not being something that is bothering you, or just like letting it go, then that act stops. It just falls away. I had this recently where, this is funny. This is a random example, but it makes sense. So I was playing a sport with my friends. We went to play pickleball. And when I went to rent the court, nobody was at the office. So I just thought, okay, we'll see if a court is open. We'll start playing. And then afterwards, I'll go and pay. Like, I'm happy to pay, just no one was there. The man comes and sees that we're playing on a court that we didn't pay for, and he came screaming, like, you can't be here, get off the court. and everyone else is looking and staring. And I could have gotten very defensive. I could also have the option of screaming back. There's lots of options. And instead, I was like, I so respect what you do, and I am sorry to not have paid in advance. How do I go about that? And he was immediately disarmed. He was like so taken aback. He literally took a step back. And I said, is there a way that I could still pay for this court? I'm sorry if that wasn't the way that you usually like for us to go about, what your process is. And he's like, come with me, we'll pay. Okay, and I paid, and I was very respectful the entire time. What happened? The anger, the frustration, the disrespect that he was feeling, all of that just melted away. It totally disintegrated. It was gone. Just like something that's non-permissible, like anger and lashon hara or lack of avos Yisrael. All of those things don't stand. They're not supposed to exist. Hashem doesn't want them to exist. They have no space in this world. What keeps them in existence is us, when we give our energy away to them. So when I get frustrated because I'm stuck in traffic, what I'm doing is I'm giving energy to something other than God, to otherness. And that specifically here with Alter Rebbe is saying that you getting frustrated, you getting angry, that's exactly what we're not supposed to be doing. You don't want to feed energy to something that's non-permissible. We want to feed energy only to things that are permissible so we could finish the purpose for which the world was created and achieve what we're trying all collectively to head towards. But when I get frustrated and dysregulated during traffic, or because my kid said something, or because my kid disrespected me, or because my son hasn't called me in 2 weeks, all of those experiences inside of me here are non-permissible. When I say non-permissible, I mean it's non-godly. It's not God consciousness. Because if I was truly aligned to God consciousness, I would never experience frustration or anger. I would just understand that I would have understanding, I would have compassion, I would trust in Hashem, I would be able to see the God consciousness or the godly soul in this other person and make space for their experience. I could calmly share with them what I would love from them. There wouldn't get to that place of dysregulation. So something that I think is an important thing for us to walk away from this is there's a real refinement happening deep inside of ourselves that we have to engage with. Where am I experiencing anger? Where am I experiencing shame? Where am I experiencing pain? Where am I not seeing, I'm seeing these things as negative? Where am I experiencing guilt? Where am I experiencing fear? And this is like the real refining of ourselves. And all of these, which are very human experiences, right? These are all just like a part of our everyday life. Where am I feeding them attention and energy and allowing them to overtake me, as opposed to me being this refined neshama who's fully in control of her emotions and fully seeing that God is here too. God is in the anger, God is in the shame, God is in the guilt. And where can I see that it's not really what those things are, right? So maybe when I'm experiencing shame, maybe that shame is actually an opportunity for me to actually look inside and say, this is an opportunity for surrender. This is an opportunity for me to turn over to Hashem instead of constantly like feeling like I'm a terrible person. No, stop with your ego. It's actually an opportunity for you to turn that into, I surrender to you, Hashem, and please take care of whatever has to be taken care of, and please refine me and help me through this experience. Or when I'm experiencing frustration, maybe that's an opportunity for me to look and say like, why am I thinking that I'm in control? Why do I have to be in control all the time? Maybe Hashem is in control and I could relinquish that to him. And what we're doing here is exactly what the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. Instead of giving energy to the non-permissible, we're giving energy to God. We're giving energy to the permissible. We're refining ourselves in a very deep way and allowing Hashem to have space inside of us, allowing ourselves to recognize a God consciousness within ourselves instead of looking at our world as such a fragmented world. And if we could all, let's say, look at something look at the world and try and look at ourselves and try to engage with this, the more that we do that, the more we're elevating everything around us. Because if you as a person are regulated and able to engage with the people around you from a God consciousness, what you're doing is you're affecting everything wherever you walk. The stones that the pavements that you walk on in the streets, your car door when you open it without a frustrated open, and you just open it because you're calm and you recognize that I'm a godly human being. What you're doing is everything that you touch is literally just sparks of God, and it's getting elevated. And we're just engaging with everything, just like the Friedrich Rebbe said, whatever comes your way, you're going to be able to engage with it, because these are the last minute, tiny little sparks that we have to engage with. So I want to give us a bracha to really start looking within with a true sense of honesty and say, where are there parts of my life that I'm giving energy towards that are not godly? And what way can I shift them in a way to a God consciousness? Where can I look at, certain frustrations or pain or connections that are faltering? And where can I say, those are the spaces, those frustrations or pain or discomforts, all of those spaces are spaces that I want to actually see as godly instead of seeing as otherness or as like, that's not part of my life. What my real life is when I open up a siddur and I start davening. Hashem is saying, that's beautiful. I love that. That's great. But I want all of it. And that all of it is hard to look at, because we like thinking that the spiritual part of our life is the spiritual part, and then the otherness I don't look at so much. And Hashem is saying, I want all of you, and I want all of it, and that's the whole purpose of the world, and I want you collectively to be working on it together. And so what comes from that is a deep ownership within ourselves that we have to take within ourselves to start looking at like the really small aspects of our world and saying, where is this not godly? And I could turn that over and let that have a God consciousness. And the second piece is, where am I seeing my own world from like a selfish perspective of like, this is my world, and where could I actually open it up and see everything that's coming at me is actually a part of my purpose too. So when I walk out of Rabbi Wolf's shul here and I witness the whole La Brea, I don't have to look at it as like, La Brea, Mein Yisrael is the place of Kedusha, but like La Brea is, La Brea. It's not, because you're witnessing it and you're seeing it. So it's your opportunity to refine it with the way that you walk down the street, with the way that you see it as a person. Do you see it as a negation of godliness, or do you see it as a part of your purpose to elevate and refine? And the more that we could, we actually live in a place with great opportunity to refine things, because in ways, Los Angeles has a lot more sheker than maybe other places. There's a lot more, it's harder to see the refinements possible here. If I lived in the middle of Sequoia National Park, I think it would be very easy for me to see like how everything here has a spark of Hashem in it. I don't, right? So us living here, it requires a little bit more from us. That means Hashem is trusting us to be a little more subtle, a little bit more nuanced in how we can expose the Eibishter everywhere. And the first way to do it is to start refining ourselves. And by so doing, we're going to affect all of our experience, everything that we touch, everything that we're involved with. So good luck. And hopefully the next year we'll just be in Yerushalayim. We won't have to be doing all this work. Let's close this.